So next we will start welcoming everybody. So like I said, this is the second of 8-part series. Today's webinar is titled Selling at a Farmer's Market, a case study of selling eggs at the Wisconsin Farmer's Market. Like I said, I'm Michelle Grimm and I work for the Taylor County Extension in Community Development. This no-cost series helps food entrepreneur, farm-based food business is brought by the Food Entrepreneurship Ecosystem Development, or FEED initiative, through the Extension Community Food System Program. This is a statewide program that fosters equitable, resilient, and sustainable community food system development through research, evaluation, and project-based partnerships like this. First, I'm going to introduce Kristen Kurowski. She is a colleague of mine, but she also works with the Wisconsin Farmers Market Association. Kristen is a commercial horticulture educator with the UW-Madison based in Waukesha County. She's the director of the Farmers Market Association and the Fresh Market Vegetable Growers. And she has 20 years of experience in sustainable agriculture. And so Kristen, I will have you go. Kristen, what resources does the Wisconsin Farmers Market Association have to help new farmers market vendors in Wisconsin? Oh, you're muted, Kristen.
I'm going to share screen. There we go. So welcome everybody. My name is Kristen Kurowski. I work for UW-Madison Extension, but also with the Wisconsin Farmers Market Association. And that was created about 12 years ago to help offer kind of some support for farmers markets so that they could work together and share information. And some of the things we've developed really are focused on developing farmers markets, especially as places for vendors to sell and be profitable and as sales venues for farmers markets. So the mission statement of the Wisconsin Farmers Market Association is that they were created to promote local food consumption through the support of education of market managers, vendors, communities, and consumers. So we definitely have a focus on vendors and doing some vendor education out there, but we do focus mostly on farmers market managers and making sure that they're the best managers that they can be so that they can run popular, profitable markets for farmers. I just have a few quick slides so that we can get on to the egg part of our session. The first thing I want to talk about with the association is that it has a robust tool for helping people find you at the farmers market. So our current website is currently under a rebuild, which will make this process even easier and more intuitive. But right now, basically what you do is you go to the homepage and you select your county. And if you select your county, then you will be able to find, for instance, Brown County, the farmers markets that are there and the days that they're open. And then if you can see on the far right, it tells you if they accept benefits, EBT, farmers market benefits. So, so basically one of the goals of our website is to make sure that people can find the farmers markets in their area. The other real value of the listing is that we update it annually. So it's always the most current listing of farmers markets. And that's one of the things that helps us in the search engines to come to the top of the list. There are a lot of other listings out there like the USDA one, but those tend to be a little bit off. So ours are updated and we hound people every single year until they update it and we make sure it's correct. So we don't have all of them. We have some staff associated to a grant that I'll mention in just a second that are helping us find the ones that we don't have listed. So right now we have a little over 300. We know that we're at least 10 to 15% aren't even reported. So we're working on those and getting those up in this year, especially with the launch of the new website. One of the other things I want to make sure I mention about the Farmers Market Association is many new vendors have questions about insurance and how to cover their they're kind of small business associated with the farmers market, especially if it's on the smaller side and they're not having like farm insurance or something like that. Just so that you're aware, through the Farmers Market Association and a relationship that we have with the Minnesota Farmers Market Association, our members are eligible for a group rate. So there's a discounted rate for being a group policy through the Minnesota Farmers Market Association. So vendor members for the association are $50, and then you can talk to the folks in Minnesota about the vendor rate, but that's all on their webpage. And if you just have questions about that, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll connect you with that webpage. And then the last thing I just want to mention about the Farmers Market Association is that the Farmers Market Association and UW-Madison Extension are right now working together on USDA Agricultural Marketing Service Farmers Market Promotion Grant. The point of that grant is, again, to grow farmers markets, strengthen and sustain. We're in the end part of doing a statewide farmers market survey to collect data from all the markets to try to assess needs and where we're at. We have 3 staff people in the state that are working on creating networks and supporting farmers markets. Those networks will be collecting sales data. They're going to institute a project that will benefit the farmers market. And then we're going to measure the sales data again to see if those had an impact. And then we're going to share out all that information. And then towards the end of the grant, we are going to probably team up with the Feed Summit, if that works out, and try to figure out try to make sure we get all that information out there of what was valuable, what worked, and so that we can just kind of make sure that the information gets out to as many people as possible so it benefits as many people as possible. And that is what I have, so I will turn it back to Michelle.
Okay, I know you have to leave, Kristen, so we have one question in the chat, and so I'm gonna read this right away to you. Will the new website help vendors find markets managers? And the question goes on, I have tracked down local officials, not as straightforward as I would have thought.
So each farmer's market that's listed on the website has a profile page, and within the profile page, it has the farmer's market contact. So farmers markets, if you want to be a vendor at a farmer's market, you really need to contact that market directly to see if they have room for you as a vendor, what their rules and policies are. There's no like one size fits all when it comes to farmers markets. So go to that page, go to the contact email or phone number and do it that way. And that should be your most direct way to get in touch with the farmers market manager for that market.
Thank you so much. And like I said, I know she has to go, but if you still have questions, if you put them in the chat, we'll make sure that they get answered for you. All right, next, I'm going to move on to our next speaker. So I'm going to introduce our partner from the Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection, otherwise known as DATCP, Mark Lehman. Mark is one of the statewide specialists that will walk you through licensings and regulation processes on farm to food businesses in Wisconsin. He's always super helpful. So Mark, here's our scenario. Farmer Jane has raised chickens for 5 years on the farm where she lives, and she eats her eggs and sometimes shares them with friends. But this year, she's increased her flock size to 50 and wants to sell them at the local farmer's market. Where does she learn about licensing registration she needs to start selling at the farmer's market? All you.
Well, okay. Well, we get calls like this all the time. Basically, I'll go down, the egg information. You can find this on the Department of Agriculture website. But if you have a flock of less than 150 birds, you can sell direct to the consumer from the farm. If you want to go to the farmer's market, you're going to need what's called a transient retail license. Now, in counties that are covered by DATCP, we would issue that license. If you're in a county that has their own health department, like Vernon County or Madison-Dane County Public Health, Waukesha County, Milwaukee County, these places all have their own health departments, and they would issue that license. Now, whoever issues that license, the license will be good statewide. So if you travel to farmers markets in multiple counties, you only need one license. We are kind of the clearinghouse for information. So if you contact us and say, hey, I'm in Vernon County and I need this license, we'll give you the number for the Vernon County Health Department. To handle the eggs, it's fairly simple. You need refrigeration. So you're going to need a cooler that can maintain 41 degrees or less. If you're going to reuse egg cartons, you have to obliterate all the old information and put in your contact information, name and address of the processor, which would be Farmer Jane. And then you have to put on a pack date and a sell-by date. And the pack date, it doesn't have to be the date the egg was laid. They're assuming that you're going to collect these eggs within 4 days of being laid. So you put the packed on date, and then the sell by date is 30 days from the pack date. And that's basically it. Since you're going to be ungraded eggs, you would have to cross off, the grade A egg, that would be on the carton if you're going to reuse cartons. Otherwise, if you're buying, just plain cartons, you just put your information on. And that's it. It's really pretty simple. It's an easy license to get. It's very low. We're not going to come out and inspect your chickens or come out and count them. We're going to take your word for it, how on your flock size. If you get to the point where you have enough eggs where you want to wholesale, like to a store or a restaurant, then you will need a license from us. And that is the food processor license. And the requirements for that would be a clean area with a hand wash sink and a 2-compartment sink. And then our multiple products graders, one of them will come out and go over that candling and grading process so that you can be an approved source to wholesale your eggs to a store or a restaurant. And that small processor license is $95 for a year. And that covers sales up to 25,000. So if you're selling a lot of eggs, you got to have quite a few chickens to reach that threshold. So, but we don't bite. We want you guys to be successful. We'll work with you. If you have questions about will your processing area pass licensing, take a picture, email it in, we'll tell you, yeah, that'll work, or no, you need to, what you need to do. But we have licensing packets for all of these things, the transient license, the food processor license, and we'd be happy to, email them out. Or if you don't have email, we'll have it printed and mailed to you, snail mail. So any questions?
So one question, Mark, who needs to register their flock?
Anybody that is going to get the transient license, I think is going to need a nest run egg registration. And we have that information in that email packet that we're going to send out. So I think if you look in state statute 97 will give you the definition of nest run egg. And that's an egg that's offered for sale that hasn't been graded or candled. So anybody that's selling under a transient license at the farmer's market is probably not going to have candled or graded eggs, so they have to register.
Any more questions? I put in the link, the DATCP licensing, but if you have more questions, make sure that you contact us or contact DATCP, because that's where I send them anyway. So, all right. I'm going to move on to our next speaker. Now I'm going to introduce our guest speaker, Jeremy Cooey. He works for a local insurance agency in Richland Center called Wallace Cooper Elliot. So Jeremy, the same scenario. Jane is selling her eggs after 5 years. She has increased her flock. Now, she has a house, a tractor, and a car insured by WCEE in Richland Center. What advice would you give your client to embark on selling farm fresh eggs at the farmer's market?
So thank you. And the best advice I could give is to pick up the phone and call your agent. I'm gonna do my best with having over 20 different people on the call today. We could be talking about 20 different insurance companies out there as well. So I'm going to speak in general terms, and we can answer specific questions later. But kind of as I was preparing for or thinking about today, one of the things I learned when I grew up was it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. And what I'm going to say on the insurance side of things, let's just kind of flip that around. So what I would encourage everyone to do is, if you're not selling in the farmer's market right now, just pick up the phone, call your agent and say, hey, I'm thinking about taking my eggs to the farmer's market. What should I be aware of? Okay, would I be covered? Would I not be covered? Because a lot of times what you'll find in a standard homeowner's policy is a lot of them are going to have business exclusions. And it doesn't mean that you can't add an endorsement to maybe pick up some of the farm market liability, roadside stands, things along those lines. But that's again where it's going to be, pick up the phone ahead of time. And in a perfect world, we would have notice, but a lot of times I get the call on Friday, which is, hey, I'm going to the farmer's market tomorrow morning. Am I covered? So obviously the more time that you're able to give your agent, just to make sure they're there and everything. But yeah, I would say a lot of times, and don't freak out, a good hobby farm homeowners policy, a lot of times you can add an endorsement to pick up the liability, and that's ultimately what you're looking at is the general liability. So if something were to happen at the farmer's market and someone was injured or someone else's property was damaged, that's what you're picking up. So it's not going to pick up the egg contamination and things along those. That's going to be more on a commercial policy. But what we're looking for is if we used the example earlier, if your tent that you have set up went blowing across the square in Madison, how many people are going to be damaged, and what would be the possible damages that could come from that, and the general liability or the little bit of extended farm liability could pick that coverage up. And so with a lot of the carriers that we work with, if you were to call our agency, depending on your homeowner's policy, you might be able to pick that up for $40 or $50 a year. The other thing I'll encourage, and Kristen jumped off the line, but there was the vendor insurance option. So I would say explore that as well, just to make sure that you're seeing all the different possibilities out there. And I'm not familiar with the vendor program, but if the kids have an egg stand set up at the end of your driveway, might be one I would lean a little more towards getting a policy that's extended from your homeowners to make sure that you have that coverage there as well. So yeah, my best advice is to talk to your agent, and also everything that we kind of talked about, where a lot of times you can add the coverage. It's not going to be that expensive. Talking more on the farmer's market side, what Mark was just mentioning, if you start going to retail and everything, now you're looking at, you're selling those eggs wholesale now, which is a totally different beast. Not that it can't be done, but now you're looking at a commercial policy versus just an extension to your homeowner's policy.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to go on to the question and answer part. So you can either add it in the chat or you can unmute yourself. And if you have any questions, this is the time that we would really encourage you to ask.
I had a question, and I'm not sure who it's for. It's a little bit off topic, but still kind of related. I have some farmers who have asked me about a refrigerated truck to bring food to a farmer's market. They don't want to all buy a refrigerated truck. They're thinking about buying one and sharing it somehow, because they're all going to the same place. So I'm just curious if anyone's ever talked about how to share equipment to take your food from your farm to a farmer market.
Well, I can jump in, that, basically that would be delivery, we will, it's not a licensable activity. But whoever is doing that, I mean, somebody would need to be responsible for maintaining the vehicle in a clean, sanitary manner and making sure that the temperature, if they're refrigerating it, make sure that it's 41 degrees or less. But the actual transport from one location to another would not be licensable from my standpoint. But, maybe, someone else can speak into liability wise, insurance wise, hauling other people's products, and then I don't know what that entails. If there's an accident, is just the driver or the owner liable? I don't know. That's
Yeah, it's going to be whoever owns the vehicle. That's whoever's name is on the title is the person that needs to insure the vehicle. So whether it's their, if they have a farm operation or if it's just under their personal name, that'd be the person to make sure you have the vehicle insured. And the other thing that I forgot to mention earlier, but I know we're talking about, like, the purpose of today is eggs, and I don't know if people would really turn in a insurance claim if I damage 2 dozen eggs. I mean, they might right now, but when you look at the overall cost of, I have some customers that, they do grass-fed beef and bring it to Dane County, and so again, we're able to add a simple, like a little extension to their policy to cover that inventory while it's off site. So again, just something else you could think about to ask your agent. But yeah, it would be each person's responsibility to insure their own their goods, regardless of who's driving the truck. And at that point, also, people can determine whether or not they want to insure it. Are you going to turn in a claim? Or are you more concerned with the liability if something were to happen with the truck, not knowing how much money you would have in the back end of the truck for your inventory itself?
And Mark, can I thank you both for those are awesome explanations. Mark, I just wanted to ask a clarification question. You said that it's not licensable. Does that mean you're not able to get a license? Like, it doesn't mean you don't need a license, or that it's illegal to do it without, like, that you just can't do it.
The license isn't needed to do that. It's like grocery store delivery. We don't license the delivery truck or DoorDash, and any of those places, they're not licensed. They're not required to be licensed. If somebody was going to hold that material somewhere for more than 24 hours, then they might need a food warehouse license. But the actual delivery vehicle would not be licensed, would not require a license. But when they got to the farmer's market, those individuals with their products, if it's TCS food or eggs, are going to require transient licenses at the market.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any more questions? Go ahead, Jeremy.
Can I just add one more comment onto that? Would be
Always.
on the insurance side, the more information we have, the better we can protect you. So using that situation to where it's like, now we're looking at a refrigerated truck, odds are it should probably go on a commercial auto policy versus a personal auto policy. So again, the more information, just disclose everything you can to the insurance agent. I always tell people, like, I'm the guy in the middle here. I'm kind of like talking to the priest and the lawyer. Like, this is between you and I right now. And then let me go out and make sure that we have you covered properly. So, make sure they understand exactly what you're looking to do with, whatever it is. And then just, kind of have a conversation with them.
Any more questions? That's good.
I had just a quick clarification with Mark. I do get a lot of questions about people, asking, I guess it's numbers, like, I have 100 chickens. Is that commercial? If I want to sell them off my farm, I have 150. Sounds like that's a cutoff number. But I'm not an ag expert. So is it really okay if I send my farmers and food producers to you? And
Certainly.
Okay.
And it's 150 laying birds, is the exemption. if they're over that on laying birds, then they would need that food processor license, the same one, that you would get for wholesaling.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then, there's the on sale, slaughter of birds too. There's an exemption where you can slaughter, if you have up to 1,000 birds, you can process them yourself and sell from the farm without a license.
Okay,
I don't
now
have
we're,
to count the 2 roosters that snuck their way into my egg laying order.
Yeah.
Sorry, been there.
Yeah. But yeah, send them to us. We'll be happy to talk through all the different scenarios. If they have eggs and they want to sell, chickens, processed chickens too, or if they want to go to the farmer's market, then they can't process them on the farm. Then they have to go to a licensed meat processor. And then if they want to wholesale, then they need a meat and poultry registration, and they need bird by bird inspection at the processor. So, but yeah, we'll run through all the scenarios with them for whatever they have, and people come up with all different kinds of business scenarios now. And I know this is kind of focusing on chickens and eggs right now, but right now freeze dried everything is the big, the next big thing. So we get tons of questions.
thank you. Now I have 2 questions, well, kind of 3. The first one, Mark, is if I sell at a farmer's market, do the eggs need to be washed?
Eggs do not have to be washed. They have to be clean. You can just wipe them down. Remember, the shell is porous. So if you're going to use anything to clean the egg, it needs to be labeled as a safe egg wash. And there are products that are certified, but you don't want to be using like Dawn or something like that. That's going to, go through the shell and probably isn't going to make you sick, but your egg isn't going to taste very good.
Okay, and then this is a 2-part question. Let's see if I get this right. What are the requirements for our farm vendors to obtain an on-farm food holding license? Please. Example, to hold a cheese, egg, cheese, produce, etc. That's what I'm reading the question is.
Okay, they want to sell these things from the farm prepackaged. That would be just a prepackaged license that they would get either from us or from the local health department. Those products would need to come from an approved source, licensed processor or licensed dairy plant.
Okay, and the second part of this is, as a vendor, is there a nice list/table of these requirements?
A nice what?
List/table of these requirements.
Have them give us a call, and we'll go through their specific situation, because it sounds like there's a lot going on there.
And you answered this already, but this is a good one. I learned something new about reusing egg cartons. So can you go through the requirements of reusing egg cartons?
Sure, you can certainly reuse cartons, but you have to obliterate any of the old information on there, like the name and address of processor, the grade statement, all of those things, and the packed on date and the sell by date. And then you have to put your own name and address and your own packed on date and your own sell by date on the carton.
And then obliterate, like that literally, like my interpretation of that is that you could take a black permanent
Take
marker
a black Sharpie
and just
and,
mark out anything that doesn't apply to your product. So if I'm not selling organic eggs, I need to make sure to mark out the organic on the carton I'm reusing.
Exactly. Yep.
Any other questions? The styrofoam ones work better in coolers, by the way. The other ones melt in the ice. Just from experience.
And it may be harder to cross out some of that stuff on the styrofoam ones too. It all depends. I'm not in the egg business, so I don't know.
I saved one of those styrofoam ones for my cooler just so I can make it. But any other questions?
Stickers don't stick. Your labels don't stick as well on styrofoam as they do on. But I also wanted to just kind of like follow up on the question that Terry asked in the chat. So if somebody, another way to interpret this is like a farm food holding license. So when does, if I sell at the farmer's market every week, obviously I have some stock each week. I am holding on to some food and then bringing it, as a transient retailer. What's the difference between kind of like a warehouse and a transient like retailer?
Well, the eggs would be exempt because you're exempt from selling them on the farm if you have less than 150 birds. So you wouldn't need a license for that. Again, you should store them under refrigeration and in a safe sanitary manner. If you're selling beef, if you have farm raised beef that you're going to sell at the farmer's market, that has to be stored under a license back at the farm. Usually the cheapest option is a retail food license because that allows you to make sales from the farm. Our retail license, I think, is $45, and there's a $20 weights and measures fee depending on where you're located. The cheapest food warehouse license for TCS food that requires refrigeration is $120. So it's almost twice the fee for a warehouse license. So the easiest thing is just to get a retail license and you're covered. You can make sales, it's stored under a license. It's a win-win.
Nice, thank you. And I just want to emphasize again what Mark said earlier is just call or email or fill out the form online on the DATCP website. Just get in touch with DATCP and talk to them. And Mark is wonderful and will answer all of your random questions that you might have. I know from personal experience. So thank you, Mark.
No problem. No problem.
Any more questions? Thank God.
I did want to follow up just kind of with that same question we were just asking. So if I'm a vegetable grower and I take vegetables to the farmer's market, do I need any sort of license, or walk me through that process too, Mark?
Sure. Raw agricultural produce is exempt from licensing. And a farm is an approved source for a grocery store. You can wash it, bag it, put it in a clamshell. But once you process beyond the harvest cut, that's going to require a license. Mushrooms are considered produce as well if you're farm raising mushrooms. Once you get into if you're foraging wild mushrooms, you have to provide a certificate of training that you are certified in identification of mushrooms. And then that's about it. If you contact us, I can send you the exemptions from the code. And I think I've got some links into some good agricultural practices that the FDA has out for growing produce. Be happy to share those with you. And I think there's some links that I have too for our own produce inspection program. There are, if you're a small farm, you're going to be exempt from the produce inspection. But if you would like an inspection, just so that you have something that shows you've been inspected, they do have a program where you can request inspection and they'll come out and give you a certificate that they've been there and inspected your farm.
Thank you, Mark, for the follow-up. I actually have another question for Jeremy too. Oh, wait, we have other questions in the chat. We will prioritize those.
Okay, so the next question, do you have a link for the foraging certification process? So how do you
I do not have a link. I believe the Wisconsin Mycological Association is sponsoring that training.
Okay.
But I don't have a link handy for that.
Jenna, well, we'll probably do some digging and see if we can find that. And we will put it in our little, we have, if you see the link that I just posted, we put all of the resources in that so you can find them. But if you have trouble accessing that for some reason, make sure you reach out to one of us.
Or if you email licensing, you know, the DATCP licensing mailbox, we will hunt that down, information down for you.
They do that.
We don't always have the answer right away, but we'll try our best to find it for you.
Okay. You're getting an email already, Mark, so it's gonna feel like you got back in vacation. You're gonna be bombarded. All right, any more questions? Oh, this is an insurance question. You want me to read this? Okay, insurance question. If she keeps the house insurance as is, starts selling an egg at a local market, would she be protected if somebody sues her for getting sick and eating her eggs? That's for you, Jeremy.
Yeah, again, I have to answer general just because there's so many different policy forms out there. But one, check with your agent. Secondly, again, it's gonna my default answer is gonna be, you know, if someone gets sick from the egg, one, how are they gonna, is that the only thing they ate that day? You know, so you kind of have some of those types of things that are gonna come into play. But typically, you know, your general liability is just going to cover the bodily injury and property damage. It's not going to be like a food contamination policy. So again, to broad stroke it, I would say that probably would not be covered. But as long as you follow Mark's steps and keep your eggs at 41 degrees,
you should be okay. And
we'll be all right.
Foodborne illness is hard to prove. Everybody thinks it's the last thing they ate.
Right.
Many times it's something you ate the day previous or even earlier than that. The things that come on quickly would be staph. You know, that's gonna make you very sick, you know, very quickly. With eggs, you know, we're worried about salmonella. I mean, that'll make you sick, but without actually having a sample of the eggs and then like somebody's stool sample where they can check the DNA of the, you know, the salmonella strain, you know, from your specimen and from the eggs and match them together, it's really hard to say with, you know, concrete evidence that that egg made me sick.
Okay. So, any last questions? I think we can. All right, so like I said, the document that we created will have the resources for all this webinar, and you can go back and look. We have the contact information from Kristen and of course DATCP, which are the most helpful when you get into this. I send people from my office all the time. And I want to really thank Kristen, Jeremy, and Mark for taking the time to help us out. Oh, I have a couple more questions, but we will finish this up. So the last question is, do you wash eggs in water or vinegar solution? Back to that question about washing.
I think that if that vinegar solution is approved, you know, for use as an egg wash, I think that is probably fine. You don't want it to be too strong. Again, you know, common sense. I would do a little Googling and see if there's a that's a tough one. I do have there is an egg in the food processor licensing packet. There is some guidelines as far as egg washing and cleaning goes, and I'd be happy to provide that to somebody if they shoot an email.
Okay, so it sounds that the best course of action, if you're asking about washing, we'll make sure that you contact Mark and clarify that. Thank you for the questions, wonderful. what Jessica put in the chat last was our survey. We asked that you take the time to fill this out. This is very, very helpful for extension and future programming, and also to justify our existence like everybody always has to do, especially in state budget years. I want to thank everybody that has attended, especially our speakers, Jeremy, Mark, Kristen, and Jessica, for doing this. We will hang on, but we'll end the recording. But if you go to